Okay, good afternoon to everybody in Africa, the Middle East, Europe, and good morning to those of you in North America and Asia Pacific. I know many of you are going to watch this on replay, so you're sleeping now and enjoying the Lunar New Year. So thanks for tuning in. I'm really pleased to have a very special guest from the beautiful country of Botswana. And I'm pleased to, he goes by Thabo, but Phaneni Thabo Silitshena is live from Gaborone, Botswana. And I'm really happy to have him on the program. We worked together many, many years ago. It's amazing how time flies. But Thabo has broad experience in transaction in banking. But for you bankers out there, transaction banking, sales, operations, risk and governance, business re-engineering, and strategy. And there's probably a few other things in there, but that just about, caps off what banking is all about. And he's also worked internationally, has had exposure to the UK in London, Tanzania, and the Seychelles. These are great countries in addition to Botswana. And he's also kind of been all over Africa associated with this as well. But so he clearly understands the landscape, the business landscape, and nobody's more qualified to talk about some of the things that we're going to be discussing here around success than Thabo is. Thabo is currently is the chairman of the Board of Southview Limited. And he's also the deputy chairperson of Botswana Digital Innovation Hub, definitely on the cutting edge. And he's previously served on the boards of the Botswana Medical Aid Society and MRI Botswana Limited. And currently he's the head of Group New Ventures, Commercial and Letshego Holdings, which is an African, for those of you familiar with the African landscape, it's an African financial services firm with operations in 11 countries, sub-Saharan countries. Thabo was with Barclays and ABSA Group prior to this, I think over the course of 16 years or so. And he led the his final job there was leading the Financial Institutions Group, FIG, at ABSA Bank Botswana as part of its CIB division. And prior to joining Barclays, Thabo worked as an audit assistant at Grant Thornton. So he's got lots of credentials. Really pleased to have him here. And he was educated. He has a Bachelor of Commerce degree from the University of Melbourne in Australia. And he's a Prince 2 Project Management Foundation certification. He's also completed lots of management development programs. He's applied those at the University of Stellenbosch and Duke Corporate Education. And I've also personally attended a lot of the Duke education, and it's just top quality. So we're going to talk about a range of subjects, but Thabo, I'm going to get a drink of water here and after that long introduction and welcome you to the program.
Thanks a lot, Brett. Pleased to be here. And I think the just as you were mentioning, the Duke one, I think that was around the time when we had you in leadership. That was the time when we had the Duke program running.
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah. And watching on this platform, I know many of my viewers, Thabo, they come here to just get educated about what's out there. What can I access and that kind of thing. Definitely Duke is a program that you should check out, right? They're very comprehensive in all aspects of things. I've attended Duke courses in mainland China and in sub-Saharan Africa as well as Thabo. So definitely check them out. Thabo, great to have you on board the program. You've done an awful lot of things. You've held a lot of roles, very broad experience. I'm very proud of you for all of your achievements and just the breadth and depth of knowledge that you have. Tell us, why don't we start by talking a bit about what you're currently doing little bit deeper and more specifically, maybe you could kind of touch on how you're helping clients and what impact you're making in your current role.
Okay. So, I think maybe I'll just start with an overview of Letsoho. Unfortunately, sure. I won't be able to delve into everything as much as I'd like to, because we are listed and are in a closed period. But
sure.
So Letsoho, it's a Botswana headquartered. It's one of the most successful Botswana companies, which has managed to grow over the last 23 or so years, from being just a Botswana operation to being an operation with a footprint, as you mentioned, across 11 markets. So we've got operations in West Africa, Nigeria, and Ghana. We are in East Africa, Kenya, Rwanda, Tanzania, Uganda, and in Southern Africa, which is most of our markets, Mozambique, Namibia, Botswana, Lesotho, and Eswatini, formerly known as Swaziland. So
that's a pretty comprehensive footprint.
Yeah. So and we previously had operations in Zambia, but we exited that market some years ago. Sold, I think, that business to one of our big Pan-African competitors, the Bayport Group. And so my role, New Ventures, is just around looking at anything that, let me say, is not BAU for the Letsoho Group. So what Letsoho's main core business is in consumer lending, as well as small, micro, medium enterprises. In some of our markets, we've got deposit licenses. So we do take deposits in some of our markets. So in my role is how do I help the business find new avenues of making either revenue or new ways of doing things. So this could be technology. So there's been a lot of work we've been doing in terms of technology. It's a very technology-driven organization at the moment. So I work with a co-head. So you'd have mentioned my role in these at Then Commercial. There's a co-head who's on the technology side. So we work very closely in terms of finding solutions for the group that help us just expand and diversify our revenue, or even have better ways of doing our core business.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. I think that's that gives us a really good sense of what you're up to. And Thabo, tell us, if you kind of go back to your early adult life, all of these wonderful things that you've done, and you've made some footprints in different countries. You've got a comprehensive banking background and experience. Did you design all of this? If you go back to let's say at the time you graduated, got your degree, did you design it, or did things kind of happen along the way, or a little bit of both? Or tell us a bit about. My viewers want to know, successful people like you, how have you done it?
Yeah, so it's a bit of both, Brett. Some by design, some not by design. So I mean, I'll tell you, when I went to university, I had a mentor who was the chief executive of the biggest life insurance company in Botswana. And he says to me, look, go off and get your degree, and, come back and we'll talk about if we can have a role for you. So I always thought, okay, I might be working in this insurance company, but unfortunately he parted ways with that organization while I was at university. We were in communication. And he was a really good mentor. So I got back, and at the time it was a little bit difficult getting jobs, because you had a lot of, the Botswana government sponsored a lot of people who undertook tertiary education, both in the country and abroad, such as I did. So you had quite a lot of competition. So my first role was, as you mentioned, as an audit assistant. I never wanted to work. Actually, I wanted to work for Barclays Bank, and I'll tell you in a bit why I wanted to work for Barclays Bank. So it was an available job. So I reached into my network. My sister has been a huge supporter of me. So I talked to my sister. She got me in touch with some of her friends who were working for some of the big accounting firms. And I had a chat with one of them who was a partner, and he said, look, You go into auditing, entry-level auditing, you're going to be poorly paid compared to some of your peers that have also just graduated with you. So you might look at them and feel a bit envious. You will not have as much reward as them, but when you've worked in audit for a while, you actually become quite in demand. And so it was that when I was hired at Barclays, it was actually because of working for an audit firm. Now, when I joined Barclays, I actually had applied for a role in the treasury business of Barclays, whereas I ended up in operations. And what happened was one of the deputy heads of operations got sight of my CV and wanted somebody with audit experience. So they gave me a call and said, "Hey, look, we've seen your application and you have been shortlisted for the treasury role. But there was another role which we had advertised that we really like you for in operations. Did you see it?" I said, "No, I've not seen it." So I said, "Okay, would you mind going to look if you still have the newspaper? If not, give us a call. We'll email the profile to you and have a look at that role. And tell us if you like it. Look, we'll give you a week to come back to us." So I went, read it, and I thought, geez, treasury, I'd studied finance at university. I'd done investments. So the treasury, I felt it's something I knew I'd do. Some of my friends that were in the same class with were working in treasury. So that, that's really where we had been doing, either treasury or in asset management. And now this is operations. So I had to think about it, and I thought, it looks like a challenge. It's not what I studied for, but maybe let me give this a try. I mean, the guys are really warm, and so I got back to them after about 5 days and said, "Okay, you can consider me for that role." So interviewed, and they hired me, and so that was in operations. And so at that point, slightly different course because I had wanted to get into Barclays. So now I was in Barclays, and I said earlier, why did I want to join Barclays? So my dad banked with Barclays, and I loved my dad so much, and he was a huge influence in my life. And one of his things was always do the best, and he would say he banks with Barclays because they're the best. So I thought that, well, that's where I want to work then, because I did want to go into banking. And I had then the opportunity. There's a good friend of mine. He's head of markets at RMB. In Botswana, and we were having lunch, and he was Standard Chartered at the time, and he had one of the business heads from Standard Chartered there as well. And I started talking to her. She's a lady that had been in banking for 2 or so decades, and she said to me, "Look, if you're in operations, you're starting in the right place. Learn the operations, and you can move across into the front office, as we call it. Back office will give you a really good grounding, understanding, the nuts and bolts of banking." So at that point, I then started making my plan, what I wanted to do. So I said, okay, I'm going to spend time in operations. After operations, I'd like to move into corporate banking. And then, one of those interventions that happened without your planning was one of my early mentors in the business was an elderly gentleman called Elliot. We used to call him EBO. He was a very, very sweet gentleman, always willing to teach. He'd always give me advice, things to do. And he unexpectedly left the bank. So his role came open now. He was in risk and governance. So I was called in by the head of operations. He said, "Look, we've got this role that's been vacated. We think you've worked a lot with Elliot. We think you'd be the best person for the job. You've got audit experience as well. Would you like to consider taking up this role?" Well, it wasn't in my plans. I said, "Can I have a think about it?" And I said, "Okay." So I had a conversation with my boss, after having, because the head of operations was my boss's boss. And my boss said, "Look, I'd say go for it. I think you'll be able to do it." Our operations weren't in a good position at the time. So, the classification. So on an overall basis, we were amber leaning on red. And so I took the role, started putting in some data, some decks and measures. And, about 18 months later, we moved being a green rated risk operations. And I always say to people, one of my most fulfilling roles that I ever did in the bank was that risk and governance operation. At the time, it didn't feel like that. It was a very thankless job.
It never does. It never does.
Findings,
right?
Yeah, you get audit findings. But even with that, I mean, I would come home after having done that role and feel like I'd done something positive for the business. And I think that it was, towards the end of my time in that role when our country head of operational risk stopped coming to the operations center. And he started adopting some of the decks I'd created for the rest of the business. And he'd say to people, if you need some advice, just talk to Thabo, he'll help you out. So that was fantastic. And then shortly after that, I went into process reengineering. That was another role which I enjoyed quite a bit. And just as I was getting back on track, or thought I was getting back on track, going to move into the corporate business, I had another call where my boss calls me and he says, look, the CEO would like you to join his office. He's seen the work we're doing. So at the time, there was a 10-minute challenge. 15-minute challenge that we had running globally at Barclays. And that was, how can we disperse a loan in 15 minutes? So I'd been working on that, and we were doing reporting. I had a very good team member that we were running, was a two-man band at the time. We had a lady in our team, but she was on maternity leave at that time. So she was valued. She was actually my number two. But during the time of this project, it was just two of us, did it very well, and it caught the managing director's attention. So at the time, I think I moved in April. I had agreed with the corporate director that I would join their business around June that year. And so in April, I had a conversation with the CEO, and it sounded interesting, but I had my reservations, and my boss called me and said, look, he's a fantastic guy to work for. This would be such a good opportunity for you. So you will learn a lot. And I joined Brett, and I have to say, working for him, it was an immense learning curve. So having moved from operations where the only part of the P&L we're concerned with is with costs, and moving to a part where we've got this helicopter view of the business. You've got all the business units you're looking after. You've got the entire P&L to worry about. He had me sitting in ALCO. I started learning, the asset and liability management in the bank, doing the ALCO courses. So it was a huge, very steep learning curve, and he was a really good leader, I think, in terms of the learnings. I mean, I'll just tell you a story which happened over a couple of weeks. So he says to me, once I'd settled in, because so I had to hand over my old role. So my old office was on the ground floor. The managing director's office was on the 6th floor. So for about a period of 2 weeks, I was, up and down, 6th floor, ground floor, 6th floor, ground floor. So once I was now settled, full-time 6th floor, he says to me, will you go over to finance and ask for the flash? I don't know what the flash is. I know who to talk to. So I asked her, please send me the flash. She sends it to me, and I'm thinking, I need to get it to his desk immediately. So I didn't interrogate or anything, just immediately sent it to him. He calls me over and says, do we know why this is going in this direction? Do we know? I said, actually, no. Could you give me a few minutes? I'll come back to you. So I went, had a long conversation, and our head of business performance analytics at the time is very patient, very wonderful leader. She's actually the chief executive of the biggest fund manager in Botswana at the moment. So she spent half a day with me, just taking me through the report, everything, what to look for every time they send it, what should I be looking at, how I query them and be more useful to the CEO. And then a couple of days, he asked me to go and get a report from retail credit. And I get this report, and at this point, I think I'd cottoned on that, okay, I need to make sure that I'm interrogating. And even though I thought I'd interrogated enough, when I got to him, he asked me a few questions which I couldn't answer. So again, I called the guy who was running that show. He was also a very patient guy. He was a guy from South Africa. We spent about a day and a half, and he took me through the business, what the metrics are. And so from that point, he then just said, before he asked me for something, let me ask every single executive, what are the key reports in your business that need to be going to the CEO? And can you take me through what they are and what the information means? And it was something which I think once he saw I had learned the lesson, he appreciated and helped me do my job much better.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
so,
I
think. Hey, Thabo, just one sec. So just for the we've got a great group of people on here. We got 14 people or so. Queue your questions up in the comment section if you have them, and we'll certainly get to those. Thabo, what I want to do is before you continue on, is I picked up, been carefully listening to you, and you know this. I'm incredibly proud of you. You're just you're sitting here inspiring me even more than 10 years after we've worked together, right? So it's really great. I've picked up a couple of key points that I just want to summarize for those watching so far. It seems to me like you were, you did design the fact that we're going to be successful, but it certainly wasn't linear. You agree with that, right? Opportunities came up, but one trend that I've noticed in listening to your story here today is that you would always get the phone call. Is that people would, when something came up, people would call you. And I think in large part, David Alto's on here. He's from North America, and he helps people find jobs. You should connect with him, Thabo, as well. He's just an amazing, inspirational guy. He posts to LinkedIn 3 times a day. And, we're always talking about this, that sometimes you said something when you took that audit job, to get started, you were advised that you're going to get paid less than other people, but you're going to pick up skills. And later, that's going to become more valuable. And I think you told the story that that's the actual case. So I think that it doesn't matter for the audience where you're working. If you're working in Botswana, the Seychelles, London, North America, sometimes to pick up a new skill set, what you have to do is you might need to sacrifice a bit of salary in order to get that. But if you do that, you learn your trade. The same thing that happened to Thabo, the same thing that happened to me. I know what happened to David Alto when he was in corporate life. You get phone calls. People call you to do something. When there's trouble, they call you. Thabo and I met because there was trouble in Southern Africa, and I got sent down there to help and got to work with great people like Thabo on this as well. So Thabo, you've I think have shared an invaluable lesson for the thousands of people that will see this on replay over the weekend, that don't just look at the salary. Okay, look at the opportunity and what you could gain. Have I summarized that correctly? And please re-steer if there's any part that you'd like to be more clear on.
Yeah, Brett, you have said it absolutely well. And I think what I would add onto that is, and this is something that my father used to drum into myself and my siblings, is anytime you do anything, any endeavor you undertake, whether you are good at that, experienced at that or not, do it to the best of your abilities. So when I was working in this audit environment, I think it was all the audit assistants, pay was an issue for us. I mean, I had to live with my sister. I'd gone from living in my own apartment at university in Australia to sharing a bedroom with my brother-in-law in my sister's house. And it was okay because, I was getting paid and I applied myself. So, my audit manager really appreciated the work I was doing. I mean, in a short space of time, I became quite trusted because of just applying my best, never bothering that I wasn't earning enough to have my own place. So it's, you summarize it very well. And I'll just say, always just do your best.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the second theme here is that always give things 110%, right? Don't give it, if you allow yourself to go to 90%, that 90 will become 80, will become 70, will become 60. So, and before you know it, you'll kind of go down in rank, right? So I think you've shared some invaluable parts. Thabo, just in the essence of time, if I could, these are golden learnings as well, or maybe I should say good as diamonds, right? So yeah, so tell us about how you deal with obstacles, right? Because it's not always a smooth ride. Do you have one example at any point in your career or personal life that you could just share? A lot of people are suffering right now around the world, as you know, with burnout. A lot of people in this part of the world, they're calling it the Great Resignation, where people were probably getting sick and tired of poor leadership before the pandemic hit. And then the pandemic hit, and then they said, that's enough. I'm not going to deal with this anymore. Do you have any advice for these people?
So, Brett, I think for me, one of the things I would say from experiences I've had is if you've got a network, you've got people you can trust, you can rely on, lean on them. You know, in these times, it can be a bit difficult because I think we are all going through it. I mean, I found myself seeing a therapist a little bit, you know, during these pandemic times, and you're able to lean on. I mean, I think, you know, the thought of going for therapies, it can be quite scary, but, you know, I'm somebody that's really started looking at my health, and, you know, your mental status is also a huge part of your health. So if you also have that opportunity, I would say speak to mental health professionals. They can be really helpful. But also, I mean, you know, your people in your own family network, you know, just being able to talk. Sometimes just having somebody to listen can be quite helpful, even if they don't necessarily give you a solution, but just that, you know, having someone to talk to who can listen to you can be quite cathartic.
Absolutely. I think that's right. And for those of you watching, if you don't know where to go, you can reach out to me and I'm happy to point you in the right direction. I'm the first person to admit that I'm not a doctor or a specialist on mental health, but I can find one. Okay. So please do reach out if there's something. Don't keep this inside. This platform is something that you can leverage as a tool to help you live your best life, right? And there's people on Facebook watching this as well. Same thing on Facebook. Just reach out. And Tristan Bliss has given a great comment. You know, sometimes a step backwards allows us to leap forward, right? Because we've given that development. Thabo, I think you've raised how that's helped you to elevate and accelerate your career. Thank you for that, Tristan. I appreciate very much. Alicia, who is in Belgium, she's in the greater Brussels area. Great lessons as well. And that's a big compliment, Thabo, because she specializes in helping develop great leaders. Her clientele is just absolutely amazing. So then we've got a bunch of your fans on here as well. So I think that's good. There's a question here, Thabo, that let's take this right now. Ian Gafella is asking, what interventions do you think would take organizations forward? So you know, a lot of organizations right now, maybe they're stagnated because of what's happening. What kind of interventions? And if you want more specifics, I'm happy to clarify that, but that's what he's written.
Okay. So I think, Brett, the first thing is probably a health check, and, you know, it sounds like a buzzword. So you need to really understand, do you have an issue? I think sometimes as well, the data, we don't use data enough. Data can tell you, I mean, I remember when we were doing strategy, we had fallen behind, and it was something which the data was actually pointing. So even when we implemented our strategy, I think if we hadn't implemented that strategy that was based on data showing us that we did have an over-reliance on our retail business compared to some of the other businesses, if you've got employee surveys, you have to pay attention to those employee surveys, because that can be a good diagnostic as well. Do you have maybe a people issue? Do you have a culture issue? But I think just as with anybody that goes to a doctor and you see a problem, if you have got data that can help you, just give you a diagnostic of where you are, even much better if there is industry information. How do you stack up against competitors in your industry, especially those that could be doing much better than you? And then even in these times we live in with global, global organizations, you can benchmark. I think once you understand or have an inkling of where you're going wrong, you can either try and fix it yourself or seek intervention. I'll give you a good story in why diagnostics are good. This was from when I was chief of staff. So I had got to a point where I thought I was doing a magnificent job. I thought I was a good boss, never had problems with my people. We had wanted to go for a team building. And I thought, rather than just go to some place and actually have fun activities, I'd like somebody to just come and assess the team and see what are the areas that we actually need to focus on when we go for a team building. I'll tell you, I was shocked when the consultant comes into my office, says, I need to close the door because I always used to keep my door open. She closed the door, says, you've got problems. And I said, what? She's like, so she says, look, I'm not going to give names. I'm just going to give the issues that your team have raised. And look, I think probably a bit of complacence had come in. But having spent, so we spent, I think, about an hour and a half, and she was taking me through what are the issues, what are the things that you can start doing before even going for a team building. And I think one of the things that the team had said is that they felt that when dealing with me, they were walking on eggshells, and I think it just needed me to open up a bit more. And I think we hear these days this talk of authenticity. So I think I had just been really kind of closed and not being open to the team. And I remember having a meeting with the team about 12 months down the line. And they said, the environment is absolutely fantastic right now. We really are enjoying our work. We really are glad you seem to have listened. And, it also, for me, it also started being about being more transparent, because some of the issues, Brett, would be, I'm just going to use made up names. John comes to me and John's got an issue with Brett. So I start trying to deal with this issue without actually having said, look, Brett, could you just come step in here? And so it was one of the things I started taking in and said, so I'd say, John, look, I'm just going to call Brett. Let's clear this and not have he said, she said. And, that was one of the things. I remember the first time that happened, John is really uncomfortable that, okay, hold on, I didn't realize Brett would get called in, but it really built transparency in the team, trust. So I think that and when we had our scores the next year in our employee survey, it was much better than it had been previously. So I think that's the power of having somebody that can come with a different set of eyes, because you could easily think everything is stellar, I'm doing a good job, and not realizing that actually the folks were quite unhappy.
I think you're right. Independent eyes can work wonders. And Thabo, you've touched on something. You take a smartphone, right? You get a smartphone, you unpack it, and you turn it on, and you're ready to make your first phone call. If there's not a SIM card inside of it, it doesn't matter how hard, how beautiful the phone is, it's not going to work. And I think what you've just touched on is that the internal part of this phone is probably more beautiful than the external part of the phone. And that's what you've spoken about with culture and leadership, is you got to get the internal components right. You gave a great example, a personal example of what you did, and what a beautiful outcome that was a year later when you had your engagement scores, right? Because you focused on your internal, the way that you did things, right? And sometimes you need an independent set of eyes to point that out to you, because we're living day to day and we're running our business and doing these things. And I think that's great. Thabo, we're running low on time. Could you tell the viewers, most of which have never been to Botswana, something that they might not know about Botswana that you're proud of?
I think the friendliness, people are quite friendly in Botswana. And it's a beautiful country. I think when people think of Africa and tourism, probably Kenya comes up, top for safari, and South Africa as well. I think the Kruger National Park is very well known, but you come to Botswana, it is absolutely beautiful. We've got the Okavango Delta up in the north. It's the world's biggest inland delta. Absolutely beautiful country. So if you are looking for somewhere to have a nice holiday, and not the usual African suspects, Botswana is a beautiful place, and we are welcoming.
It really is, yeah, and you are very welcoming, and just wonderful people like yourself on this program, and it's the home to. How's the diamond industry nowadays in Botswana?
It's a bit. The last report that came out this week, sales are up quite a lot. I think we are. I don't want to say hostage, but we are. I'm struggling to find a better word at the moment. But most of our sales are through the North American market, the east to the east, India, China. So if there's a bump in any of those economies, it affects sales. So we've had some ups and downs in the last few years, but I think there's also now the challenge that we see of synthetic diamonds coming in. I think as we move with time, the demographics, millennials are more willing to accept synthetic diamonds or alternatives. So it is something that we'll be carefully watching. Some of the mines are moving to projects. So all our diamond mines have been open cast. Some of the mines are now embarking on projects to go underground as they to lengthen the useful life of those mines. So I think as long as we've got good demand in the markets, we hope we'll keep doing well with our diamonds.
That's fantastic. And what percent of the economy is driven by the diamond industry, roughly?
It has, so in the past, mining accounted for, I think, about 40% or 60%, of GDP. That has fallen in recent years, partly due to the diamond demand being subdued, but also I think due to efforts at other parts of the economy. So tourism is one of those parts of the economy that have picked up. Agriculture has had downs in terms of there's a state-owned entity that has been responsible for beef exports. They've had a few issues of late, but what we are seeing is a pickup. A lot of people, we've seen people, leave their corporate jobs and go into farming. Quite a lot of horticulture. So that's been started to pick up, in the economy, and then financial services as well has done pretty okay.
Fantastic. Yeah, Botswana, for those of you that aren't familiar with it, is an incredibly well-run country, great people, incredible culture. And if you, as Thabo mentioned, if you haven't had the opportunity to visit, it's definitely should be on your list to do that. So, Thabo, I'd like to thank you. We're unfortunately running out of time, but I could talk to you all day. I think it'd be great. And there's been some invaluable lessons that you shared from your incredibly successful career. The point around data, get data when you're not sure where to look at the data. You can make more informed decisions that way. The other is don't just go after money and salary. Work on yourself. Okay, you're going to be able to. You'll get compensated for that. It might be later on the back end, but it definitely will work. And just incredible lessons. Great advice from your father. Okay, give it 110%. right? Don't let it slip, because that will be returned to you as well. And I think great advice that you've given in the midst of the pandemic economy, right, where people are struggling. This is a great opportunity to work on yourself, to better yourself, and to skill up, because there are great companies. Thabo, you mentioned there are great companies out there that you can benchmark against, and that they have their culture optimized. They're thriving. They're doing incredibly well. Just you can look them up. I'm not going to list them right now, but Zoom, Apple, people in the technology sector, people in the transformation sector. Okay, they're way ahead of the curve. Okay, and this is happening right now. So work on yourself, skill yourself up, and you'll be able to thrive as part of this economy. Anything to add to that, Thabo?
Brett, look, what I would add, if I can just hopefully not take too much time, two things I would add.
Please do.
You talked about skill. We are in a time when we've had a lot of time to spend at home. There's so many, there's Coursera, there's the Khan Academy, there's various others that you get free university level courses. I found myself having joined Letsopo, having to do a course from the University of Copenhagen on digital transformation, because it's a hugely digital company, and I needed to just bring myself up to speed. So there's all these opportunities. Even if you don't have money, there's so many free courses you can get on the internet. The last thing I just want to say, and because you talk about leadership, I've had this benefit from yourself. I've had this benefit from some of the managing directors I work with, and if for leaders, talk up your people. I've had opportunities because in a room somewhere where I didn't know I was the subject of conversation, and being propped up by good leaders, and people don't forget that, and it's immensely powerful. So I think for me, it's as leaders, let's lift up our people, whether it's coaching them when we're with them, or showing them the ways without doing the work for them, inspire them, and also let's I've seen people who in a room, they talk about themselves, but Brett is in his team, and Brett does a good job. Why isn't he talking about Brett? And somebody that wouldn't know Brett might not pick up on that, but it's really important to give dues to our people. Even if you don't know if they'll find out about it later on.
I think you're spot on about that, and you've just laid out what great leaders do, right? And leaders, I have this thing I say every day, and it drives me. Leaders grow leaders, and I think you've just given some examples of how to do that. And Thabo, we're out of time, but I thank you. It's wonderful advice. I know for a fact that so many people are going to benefit from hearing your words, and I'm going to look forward to having you back on the program again in the future. And just one note here at the end, Joe Gonzalez from Florida, who I know quite well, has, for all of you watching, connect with him, okay? He will volunteer some of his time. He's an expert in all of what we're talking about. He will volunteer some of his time to help everybody, okay? So how's that for an offer for tuning in? And I think that's wonderful as well. Thabo, thank you. God bless you. And all of the great people of Botswana, your family, your colleagues at work, and I really appreciate you taking the time to be on the Packard Network Live today.
Thank you very much, Brett. Have a good weekend, and thank you, everybody.
You're most welcome. And next week, please join me. The cameras will move up to the UK, and we're going to talk about emerging markets. So a big part of my network lives and works in emerging markets. And basically, I think that you're in for a great treat. We're just going to have a casual conversation about our own perspective on emerging markets. So thanks very much. And we'll be in touch with everybody again soon on the Packard